Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Game Trail Pursuits podcast. This is episode number 5. My name is Joshua Likens, and I am your host. Today's episode is titled The Freeze. So, tonight we're doing things a little differently in this episode due to scheduling. However, we still have a special guest. So, before we dive into this one, I know that in the last episode I told you guys my friend Cody was going to be on the show for episode 5, but right now we're preparing for a deer hunt tomorrow. So while he's getting things done on his side, I was still lucky enough to get another one of my close friends, Javier Lancaster, to join us today.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me on the show.
Heck yeah. So Javier started hunting with me in the 2023 season, and we have honestly had a lot of fun. I want to say the first time I had Javi go on a hunt with me was for dove, so around this time last year. After having him go out with me a couple of times, I had him get his waterfowl license, and we went quite a bit. So Javi and I will talk about a few of our hunts together and what we do to prepare for the freeze. So honestly, I say we jump right into this. So Javi, go ahead and just introduce yourself.
All right, so I'm one of Josh's very good friends. We've been friends for a very long time. So I personally have been hunting ever since, honestly, I could remember. But I never really got into the bird, the waterfowl, anything like that. I always did the bigger game, like the bears, elk, deer. Actually, the only thing I ever did, which actually was my first hunt, was for turkey.
Okay. All right, heck yeah. So you've done some type of bird hunting, just not, obviously like, dove or duck and pheasant, stuff like that?
Yeah, no, I hadn't done anything like that.
Right.
You were the one that actually, like you said, got me into it. You're like, you like to hunt, and would you like to go with me to go and shoot, do some dove hunting? And I was like, well, I've never done that, but,
right.
Why not start?
Mm-hmm. So our first hunt, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it was like late when we ended up going to Walmart. I feel like that's a trend. Like every time I've gone to get a license, like especially when I first started getting into things, it was always like late at night. I'm like running and rushing to try and get the license, trying to convince the dude at Walmart to sell it to me. But I want to say that's kind of the same, I think, right? Or did we go?
No, that's exactly what happened. So you would ask me the day before, or actually the night before, you're like, hey, would you like to go with me? And I was like, sure, I'm down. When are you going? And you were like, well, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So me and you both went to Walmart, and we were walking through hoping that somebody was going to be there, typical, Walmart sporting goods person wasn't there. So we're rushing around, pushing buttons, trying to get somebody to come over to the counter so that way I could get my hunting license, because Walmart, ever since, recently, has decided to close at 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
We were there, I believe, at like 10:35, 10:40, right. So it was, right on the edge there.
Yeah, no, and then, that next day, honestly, I think I have like a hard time kind of remembering, how that hunt went, just because myself, I've done, I did a lot of dove hunting last year. This year, I finally got to go out. I've done, I went out twice now dove hunting, so all of it kind of jumbled together, so I can't really say I remember the first time. Actually, nah, I do. I now remember. So I remember I took you to one of these spots, and we went and we sat at a cove, and it's like a highway, right? That's where those doves are just flying like crazy. I actually said this in one of my previous episodes. I won't say I said it in Dove Crazy, but I was telling them how, that little valley was like a highway for doves, and they were like landing in the tree, and we'd have to shoot, and they'd fall, and then we had to walk all the way down and go get them, and then we had to walk back up. Did you expect that that's what we were going to be doing whenever you first went out?
So, if I'm going to be honest, no, I didn't expect that, where we ended up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we first got there, we went to that one little spot, and we saw them all before it was shooting time. Mm-hmm. We saw them flying everywhere, here, there,
Right.
We were waiting, and then finally it was shooting time. And then we were sitting there, nothing flew, nothing was going anywhere. And then that's when we decided to move, and we went over that little ravine. And then, honestly, I mean, I don't want to say it was like easy because it really wasn't.
Right.
But we were sitting there, and we were patient, and then they just started coming. Yeah. Like none other. And we would go, and then we'd have to hop over that little creek, go grab them, and then.
So part of what we're saying too, like when I talk about like you'd shoot one and you have to go get it. I had a 16 gauge break action, right? Single shot. And you also had the same type of shotgun.
Yes, mine was a 12 gauge.
Yeah, so it's like you put one in, shoot, gotta reload, you get your dove, you gotta like mark where it lands because those things they blend in, and like you'll be searching for, just today I went this morning and it's like you shoot one, you watch where it goes, and I'm still looking for it for at least 3 minutes, so it's like once you shoot one, you gotta go and retrieve it right away, or else you're gonna potentially lose a bird. But it was still fun, and we haven't gone out together yet, but that'd be something that we need to get going, make a plan for that one for sure.
Definitely.
So we also, we did some duck hunts. Do you remember our first duck hunt?
So I do actually remember that, and that was once again one of those last minute going to Walmart, getting the license and getting it figured out.
Yeah, I have a very terrible scheduling issue. I never can plan things in advance. I've gotten better with it, but in the past it was always like, I don't like going hunting by myself, and I'm like, oh, Javi likes to hunt. Hey man, you want to go hunting? Oh yeah, dude, when? Tomorrow. Oh, I don't have a license. We'll go to the gas station. We'll go to Walmart. But yeah. So like I said, we did some duck hunts together. Was our first one at the pond?
Yes, our first one was at the pond. And I remember because we were at Walmart, we got the license, we got everything we needed.
Right.
And you were like, well, we got to get there early, because we got to get the good spot. So we agreed, both of us, that we would get there at 4 a.m.
Right.
So that way we would be able to get our spot, get what we wanted. Mm-hmm. I do remember that when we showed up, the parking lot was full. Mm-hmm. And the spots that we wanted, because there was the 2 spots that we had talked about, were both taken.
Yep.
So I remember that time we kind of just settled and went over on the backside, which wasn't as good, but still had potential.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know if I really touched base on this, but last year was, I want to say, was a huge year for everybody, picking up hunting. And with that, it's like, everyone and their mother, their brother, their sister, their whole family was hunting. And it's like, for the longest time, you'd see maybe one person out there hunting. And then last year, like you said, the parking lot was full of people. And we ended up, I think we just started walking at that point because, everyone was shooting at like the same group of birds, and like this little pond that we went to, all the spots that we go to are public. So obviously everyone's going to go to the public spots. And anyway, this little pond, it's pretty dang tiny, and the birds that fly in, it's like, you can shoot those birds, if they're coming in from like the northern side of the pond, you can shoot them all the way at the other end, but there's people who are like right at the very, right on the tip where they're at, so it's like, we decided we were just going to start walking around and hope for the best. Like we hit the river right behind the pond, and we didn't have any luck the very first time. I could say a lot last year, there wasn't a lot of luck.
No, in general, last year there wasn't. It wasn't due to the fact that they weren't there.
Yeah.
It was more of the fact of because of how crowded it was, and we just couldn't get them, called in to where we were at.
Yeah.
We would actually, call them in, but they would end up going over to this person or this person over here. And that was, so it wasn't due to the fact that they weren't there.
Yeah.
It was just honestly a luck thing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the second time that we went hunting was actually in the evening,
Mm-hmm.
and we went to that same pond.
Right.
And it was the same story,
Mm-hmm.
people were in the good spots. So we started walking around. And I remember all of a sudden, out of these little,
The reeds.
the little reeds, we just, hear flat, flat, flat.
Mm-hmm.
I turn around and bang, you got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that one was a blue teal, if I'm correct.
Yep. Blue wingtail. Yep.
Blue wing teal. And I was honestly surprised because we hadn't even, set up. We weren't nothing. We were just walking around the edge.
We just got there. Like it was as soon as we got there, I had my waders on. We had like set the decoys down, and I was just getting in the water. And that's when, like you said, it started just fluttering into your. I was like, "What? Oh God!" And I water swatted it. He didn't even get off the water yet, and I got him.
Well, I think that was one of those things more of it just, I don't want to say it like scared us, but like we were not prepared at all for that.
Not at all.
And you were just able to draw and.
Yeah. Pretty dang quick. Yeah, so, I told you guys in, the last episode, I only had, 2 kills last year. It was that blue wing teal and then a goose. And crazy enough, Javi was there for both of them. So Javi was there for the blue wing teal, and Javi was there for my goose. And do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, sure, why not? So it was honestly quite a ways into the season at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked to me about going up to this, high up place that's up in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And I was down to go with you because I actually camp in that area quite often, and I see a lot of action, a lot of geese, a lot of ducks, because they just love it up there, and it's a decent sized lake. It's way bigger than the ponds, obviously, and so you had talked about that you had gone to the spot beforehand, and it was pretty decent, so we walked and we hiked over there. But one thing that we did not necessarily expect, we knew it was going to be cold.
Yeah.
We it has to be, it's getting to winter time, we're way up in the mountain. But when we started walking over there and the ground was pretty much ice all around, and then we hiked probably a good, mile?
Yeah, I'd say at least a mile.
About a mile or so. And we get to this spot, solid ground, solid, just covered in frost.
Mm-hmm.
The first, probably 5 to 10 feet of the water is just completely frozen.
Yeah. And it was thick too. You could walk on it.
It was. You could walk out on it and you were good to go. And so we set up, we broke up some of the ice, at least what we could. Set out the decoys, and we've been sitting there, and they were flying, they were really high, but they were flying back and forth, back and forth. Actually, that was probably the one time that I actually had a shot at a mallard, but I couldn't see it because there was that rock that was right in the way, because you actually called it in, and it came flying right into it, but I never saw it because that rock was right in the way.
Yeah.
And so we've been sitting there for probably a good couple hours or so when you spotted this goose that was all the way on the other side.
Well, it was the group that flew in, and he was the only one that broke off. Yeah.
And he was all the way on the other side of the lake. Mm-hmm. And at that point, honestly, you were like, you know what? I'm going to do this just for fun to see what happens. So you started calling, and he came all the way from the other side of the lake, all the way over to your decoys and where you were at.
Mm-hmm. And I remember because, so all that year, like I said, before I got the goose, I had the teal. And that was my dream for that year. I was like, I need to get a goose. Like I came close a couple times, prior. But when I called him, from him flying to landing, on the other side of the lake and honking back and forth till he came all the way up, I was like, Javi, can I please take the shot? Javi, can I please take this goose? Please, man. Please. And he's like, I don't care, man. Shoot it. Just take it. Get it, dude. Like, that was...
That was literally all I said. I said, I don't care. You want it, shoot it, but you better, you better hit it.
And he was, man, he was quite a ways away. And I still had the 16 gauge, and I was able to get him. And did we see the mallard after, or was that before?
Mallard was just before that.
Yeah. And I want to say we had like maybe a small group of maybe like two that flew in again, but it was just like they were too far, or they just weren't feeling it. They didn't want to come into the decoys, So like, unfortunately, it was selfish of me because like I had already gotten at least something that year. And you did not get anything, right?
I did not. No.
And for anybody, like I told you guys before, like it sucks, but you can't have that mentality of you're gonna walk out with something. Like you do it for fun, right? But because of last year, what are your thoughts like going into this next season? Like, is this something that you're still interested in? Do you think you're gonna try something else? Like, kind of where's your mind at on all this right now?
So after what had happened last year, everything we gone through, so I personally, I really had fun.
Mm.
And honestly, that's the biggest part of hunting in general.
Yep.
Is having fun. Because, there are the people that do it for sport and, do what, but that's the thing. They're having fun while they're doing it.
Right.
Because even if it's just to put meat in your freezer, the experience of going out and doing that, there's honestly nothing like it.
Right.
But like I said, I really had fun and enjoyed it. So this year, I definitely do plan on going again.
Right.
I'm just more excited because it's not necessarily the trial year, the test year, the first year that we're actually going out doing things, So we actually kind of see what they did, where they were at, what times, where they were here, whether they were down at the lower elevation, the higher elevation.
Yeah.
Because that honestly probably would have played a way bigger factor in what, like, our success and what we would have done and how we would have done it, because we were just going and shooting blind.
Yep.
Like, we really were. We're, this looks good, this spot looks good.
Right.
And we pretty much just showed up.
And, another thing too, like I told you guys before, 2022 is the first year that I did it. And then 2023, I tried doing it kind of by myself or with hobby. I still had no idea what I was doing. So he's 100% right. Like, it was a trial year still. And I can say that, with that trial year, we learned a lot, for sure. A lot of the spots that we had gone to, we're definitely more than likely going to go again. But in one of my last episodes, I talked about like scouting and how important scouting is. Because, like you said, we were going in blind. We went to, it was still by that same lake up the mountain. There's like that little creek.
That little creek.
Yep. We went there, and I found the spot I thought was perfect. I thought it was going to be great. I thought that's where the mallards would be flying in. Well, I was right to an extent. They were still up a ways from where we were. So we tried jumping them, and I want to say there was like 5. They were all hens. They were all mallard hens, but we snuck up on them. We got pretty dang close, and then the snow was so thick. Like, when you're taking a step, your foot's going in at least like what?
It was probably a good 12 to 14
Yeah,
inches
no,
of snow.
for sure, yeah. And like you'd be falling into the snow, and then like they seen us and heard us like, way before we could even get close enough to get like a good shot on them. We tried. We tried shooting. Didn't even hit a single one of them.
No.
And that was our last hunt last year.
Yes, that was the last one of the season.
And we tried to go out with a bang when we did not. But, this year, a lot of it is, scouting, really thinking about the spots, really preparing and planning for, everywhere that we want to potentially hunt at. So I know that's something that we're going to talk about. We're going to try and figure out later on down the road, like what we're going to do. Um, so one thing I want to touch base on real quick to everyone listening, you're probably wondering like, why are we just saying the spot or stuff like that? And as every hunter knows, you don't want to give up your spot, right? Because if I tell you where it's at and then you decide to go there, like it's not a problem, it's not an issue, but it's like that respect thing, you don't want to take someone's spot. Like if they take you there, you shouldn't go and hunt it by, with taking a group of random people. Like I showed you the spot, for whatever reason, just for fun, like let's do it together. And then you take my spot for everyone else who's not supposed to know about it, right? But that's why we're saying the spot and stuff like that, just because, we know what we're talking about. You guys don't gotta know, and that's okay. But so if you guys if you're wondering that, that's why. So last year, um, we actually talked about this today, and that's kind of why I was like, I think I need Hobby on the podcast today. But we were talking about like last year, you're borrowing gear, right? So let's dive into that one too.
Yeah. So once again, like we talked about last minute, just coming out of nowhere. This is what we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna try. I remember that you had this buddy that he had gear already that he was willing to allow me to borrow because you had already asked, you had already planned it out. You already knew we were gonna go. You were gonna ask me, like, so you had already talked to him about me possibly borrowing his gear. And so the night came, you finally asked me, I went got my license. You, sent him a text. Hey, can we come get this stuff? So I believe it was like 11:30 midnight.
Oh yeah, it was late.
And we just, he's like, yeah, this is where it's at. So we showed up, we went, got it, packed it into your car, and then we were set to go. And all of last year, I ended up borrowing that stuff from him.
So like, you borrowed like waders, and the layout line was really it.
Pretty much, that's
which isn't. I mean, it's not terrible. Like everyone doesn't just have that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, but with that, you were talking to me today about wanting to go and getting your own stuff, or
correct. So, yeah, I want to go out get some decoys because I don't have any of that. Because, like I said, so I've been hunting before,
Right.
but not prepared for this. I have nothing that was at all, what I needed to be able to do this kind of hunting. You like I said, you kind of threw it together so that way I was able to do it with you. But yeah, I want to get some decoys. I need to get a layout blind, good waders because the ones that I borrowed they were good. I personally, if possible, I'd like something a little thicker, maybe. Or
yeah. So we were talking about going to Shields. So I actually got my pair of waders from Shields, and the waders they have like their insulation, and they're labeled on like the boot. And I want to say mine was like 1,300 or something like that. And they're good, but I tell you what, like you sweat. You sweat a lot, like your feet, and then they get cold because you're, standing in, 13 inches of snow, so like your boots get cold and then your feet are wet, so they get cold. It's a whole thing, but it's still good to have because, we're both able to go out into the water and we're both able to, throw out decoys and pick up and retrieve our own birds and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, your waders are definitely very important. If you decide to get your own decoys, that's something that you'll, if you get your own decoys, that's something, especially if you decide to go out by yourself. Or if you want to take, one of your friends or family members to go, you'd have your own things and You know, if you didn't get those, like I would tell you, like your decoys wouldn't have to be like the top priority because you could always borrow mine. But but that's still something that you want to add to your array of things, which is great. Uh, a layup line, I think, is amazing. One of the harder things that I learned about the layup lines was like knowing when to use them, right? Because some of the places that we went to, it's like we brought layup lines, but we were standing in the water because we were too far away, or the trees were, that were in the water, were just too far for us to even do anything. So it's like layup lines are great, but you got to know when to use them. So that comes part of that whole scouting thing. Um, and then you were talking about wanting to get a new gun too.
Yeah. Because as fun as it is, to be out there playing Elmer Fudd, you know, it's something that if you're gonna be in this type of, game, that you have to have multiple shots.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, you can be the best person out there, you don't have the best aim, you're not gonna hit every time.
Oh, 100%.
And that's not necessarily due to, like I said, I mean, your aim could be perfect. But, when you shoot a shotgun with a whole bunch of pellets, they spread. They don't spread the same way. There's gaps. There's, hundreds of factors that play into it.
Exactly.
So being able to have, multiple, shots, it definitely, honestly, that probably would have changed a lot too on our hunts. We probably would have gotten more.
Right. So yeah, like you were saying, like what we were saying earlier is we both started out with, single shot break actions. And yeah, I mean, it was fun. Like for dove, I guess, because, it's a smaller dove and like, I don't know. That was fun. But for ducks, it's like they will fly in, they won't land, they won't, they'll cup up and they'll turn out. And if you only shoot one time and you miss, well, you just lost that. And if a group of them comes in and you shoot and you miss, well, you just missed an opportunity on shooting, 6 ducks, right? And at least if you have your, pump or even a semi, like, you at least will have your 3 shots because you do have to have a plug in your shotgun, just so everybody knows. But, so yeah, that's 100% right. Like, a new shotgun, especially for this type of hunting, a good shotgun that has multiple shots is great. You don't have anything particular in mind right now. That's part of why we're gonna go and look. Is what else do you think that you would like really want for that particular hunting?
Well, so something that I had actually brought along with us when we went to the creek was a heater. It was one of those, you hook up the little green propane tanks, and I want to get one if possible that's possibly a little smaller.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you were saying, when to use the layout blinds and when not to. So if it's a time that we don't use the layout blinds and we're just out there and we kind of build something, build us some camouflage, whatnot, those heaters work phenomenal because we were freezing.
Yeah. So real quick, let's dive into like the preparing for the freeze portion before we get to anything else. But so yeah, so like I told you guys, this episode is titled The Freeze. So, when it comes to, it doesn't matter what you're hunting for, whether you're doing your deer hunt and, or an elk hunt in the middle of winter, or your duck hunts, like goose hunts, whatever, preparing for the freeze. So some of the things, like you said, that little buddy heater was perfect because it was super cold out there for that, because that was the last day. And I wish we would have done that way sooner. Like I had bought an electronic hand warmer, right? Because those little like the shaking ones, what are those called? Do you know?
No, those are just their hand warmers.
Yeah, just the hand warmers.
The basic ones you can get at the gas station or anywhere.
Those ones, I don't know, they suck. I don't like them. you shake them up, they work for a little bit, they feel good, but you only can do like one hand, or you put them in your mitts, they get too hot, or there was, I hated those because, and then they go cold. I think they go cold pretty dang quick.
Well, especially like because usually, if it's just chilly out, so if it's like, 30 or 40 degrees, they work pretty decently. They'll last you a while.
Right.
You're fine. But out there when we were out there, at -2 degrees,
Yeah.
anywhere from -2 to about 5 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
those don't really work. They
Yeah.
don't. They freeze themselves
Mm-hmm.
after so long of sitting there and having them trying to warm them up and do whatever you needed. They only lasted so long.
Yeah, and like you said, when he brought that, like our hands were freezing because you're holding a shotgun that's either wood or plastic or whatever it's made out of. Like that thing gets cold, it doesn't got anything to warm it up, right? So when you're holding it with your bare hands, like your hands get cold. And you had that, and we turned it on so we could warm up our hands, so we could feel our fingers again. That was amazing. So when so I told you guys before, we're here in Colorado, and it starts snowing around.
Honestly, I mean, it depends.
Yeah,
Because
it's all over the place.
if you live in Colorado, it can snow at the beginning of November
Mhm.
all the way until February. We've had snow in March.
Mhm.
I mean, it just depends.
Right.
But the weather is unpredictable because even in the summertime, you'll have days where it snows on Monday,
Mhm.
and then Tuesday it's 75 degrees and all the snow melts instantly.
Yeah. True.
And that's part of when, like you said, scouting, planning, that's a big part. So if we go out, we scout, we plan, and it's snowy, so we're like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, this is where we're gonna go. But then, it comes the day of, all the snow is now gone.
Yeah.
So, that creates mud, that creates, whatever problems that
And we
come
definitely
up.
we had some of those days. So like our winter, like it's almost like the ending of December through February, right? And that's where it's like almost always snow, but in between that time frame, like you said, it would be, 60, 70 degrees one day just randomly. And you're like, it was just snowing for the last 2, 3 weeks now. Like, what? And then the next day after it's been 70 degrees, it's snow again, but, uh, so yeah, like, obviously good clothing. I think this year I'm going to invest in wool socks. I was told that last year, like at the beginning, and for some reason I still never got any. And I regretted it every single time we went out. So I think this year I'm going to invest in wool socks. Um, I actually was able to get one of those Milwaukee heater jackets. It works to an extent, especially if you're in the layout blind. Oh, it's amazing. I would say if you could, you should. Because if you're just laying there, and like even if we're not getting any action, like I would take a nap because of how, like, you got when the wind's blowing, it hits your layout blind, it goes over it. It doesn't even hit you, and those layout blinds are not. I mean, they're pretty comfortable, honestly. And then you got that heated jacket. It's like you get to take a little nap if you wanted to, but um,
They're good. They're only good to a certain extent because those jackets, they heat, specific areas and they have the coils only in specific areas. Because when you have a jacket or something like that, it can't go through the entire thing.
yeah.
For one, your battery wouldn't last
Oh yeah, the battery, yeah.
at all. And two, there's safety protocols that they have to follow with them. And so you're right. They do like heat only specific areas. So if you're not somewhere where, you're covered or that you can like keep warm in general, then they are good to a certain extent.
Yeah. I also I had a pair of like long johns. I think long johns, that was important to have because when you're walking around, especially with just like jeans, or like if you have like even like baggier jeans, um, I just remember like walking and like touch your skin and it was like still cold, So like the long johns were good because it's like it's tight on your legs. So long johns. If you're going to invest in anything preparing for cold weather, your jackets, they don't have to be heated jackets, but like, layers is important because you can always remove layers. It's going to get hot with all that moving around, especially like, when we were going to our spot, it was like a mile hike in and you got all your layers on and you're sweating like 10 steps in, but you're able to remove layers. Um, I was actually talking to him about this today when we were getting ready for this podcast, but like I think a sled is important because when we're trucking through, 14 inches of snow trying to carry decoys, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Your arms get tired.
The snow catches your leg,
yeah,
tripping.
yeah. Like I don't know how many times I fell last year just walking. um. So and before we move on, we're still going to be hitting points about preparing for cold weather and stuff like that throughout this episode, even though we're going to be talking about a lot of things. Um, is there anything else that you want to prepare for or you want to have with you when we go looking for things for the season for you? How about like a duck call? How do you feel about getting like your own duck call and learning how to do that too? So I'm not the only one calling.
Which is fair, and that honestly that would probably help. Like we talked about. So last year was kind of for me it was a feel it out,
Mm-hmm.
see whether I would like it or not, what would it would look like. So you had talked about it and mentioned it a few times, like hey, you should get a call and whatnot, but I didn't know whether I was going to like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was like, I'm not going to invest into something if
Right.
I'm not too sure about it. So definitely this year, I'll get some duck calls, probably some, geese calls,
Mm-hmm.
um, to have those and to be able to help. Because at the same time, when I would go, I just kind of felt like I was just sitting there, you were
Right.
calling or doing whatever, and
And I think duck calling is fun. Like I would just be quacking just because, it's something to do while you're just sitting there waiting for them to come in. And then when they start to come in, like when I have, because I've got 10 decoys of, ducks, and it's like when I'm doing my calls, it sounds like just one duck. And if you get a call too, and you're also calling, it sounds like multiple ducks when they're flying. It's more realistic more than anything. Um, so like that, it's something good to invest in for sure. Um, so I told you guys that we were going to get into fishing, and I told you guys that Cody was really, you know, big into fishing, but Hobby is also big into fishing. He loves fishing. So Hobby's going to take it away here for a little bit. And, I'm still going to, we're still going to have our conversation. But yeah, I want you to talk about, how did you get into fishing? Like, what is it that you love so much about fishing? Like, let's dive into this too.
all right. So fishing has been something that's been a part of my life way before, like honestly, probably since I was 2 or 3 years old. So my dad, he has been really big into fishing ever since he was younger,
Mhm.
and all the time we would go to these random places. He'd just wake me up at 3 in the morning
Right.
one day, and hey, we're going fishing.
Mhm.
When you're younger, you're like, okay, cool.
Mhm.
So you wake up, you get up, go to the gas station, get your snacks, get your little things before you head out,
Mhm.
get some worms.
Right.
Uh, when I first started fishing, we kind of kept it local. So we would go to this little lake that's, in the town over,
Mhm.
and we would go set up our favorite fish of choice. Not necessarily anymore, but it definitely used to be a catfish.
Mhm.
We would catch, 10, 15 catfish,
Right.
and we would just have a big old fish fry. Um, but like for catfish, there's definitely multiple ways to catch them. The best way that I've come up with as far as setting up my pole.
Mhm.
So when I get my fishing license, I get, the extra rod stamp.
Mhm.
So therefore I can have the two poles. Uh, in Colorado, you can only have two hooks
Okay.
attached to one pole. Um, Yes, compared to like, so say in Missouri, you could have jug lines and you could have 100, 200 hooks within, 100 meters of line.
Right.
And you can't do that here in Colorado. As well as baiting the water, chumming the water. You can't do that.
Right.
I'm sure, people still do. But so I will put about 2 to 3 sinkers on the very end of the line. And then about a foot and a half up, I'll put my first hook. And then about another foot and a half up, that's where I'll put my second hook. Being in Colorado, the one thing that I have learned, because a lot of people say that Colorado fishing is terrible, it's bad, it's really hard to do, you don't catch nothing. Honestly, you can't beat a worm.
Yeah.
I will be straight up honest with with you. You can't beat a worm. The good thing about worms and like whatever is, there's not really like a specific target, species of fish that you're going for. You're casting it out there, and you could get a bass, you get trout, the mighty bluegills, everybody's favorite, catfish, carp, like the list just goes on and on.
Right.
You can catch anything with a worm. Because when you go more into the, power bait or the marshmallows, you're more of targeting the trout or, these specific fish. And the worm is just universal. It's probably the best that you can do, honestly. Nowadays, my preferred angle is bass.
Okay.
So that came up probably a good 4 or 5 years ago. So at that same lake that we were up, hunting at, I go camping there every single year for about a week and a half. So my dad, he had his setup, his pole setups, whatnot, and all the time he went out there in his waders, and he would go probably till it was about waist deep or so, about 5 a.m, and he'd just be out there, using his lures, and he'd come back with, just bass after bass, and we'd take pictures, and he'd let it go.
Right.
And it just, like, it dumbfounded me. It really did. Because I had never caught a bass up to that point. And I'm just confused. I'm like, how are you catching these? Like, I'm casting my pole out in the same water, same area, and nothing's happening. And finally, once I got big enough to actually put his waders on, so that's why it was about 4 or 5 years ago, he was like, here, take it. Take this, go try it. Go see if you can catch anything. And sure, second cast in, I hooked into something. Now, honestly, if you've never caught a bass or, they fight like none other, you'll think you have something hooked that is way bigger than what it actually is. Because bass are a fish that they just fight and they give you that rush and that feeling. Because trout, if you get a big enough one, it'll give you the same thing. But there honestly isn't. There's nothing like bass.
Bass fight.
Because they hit it hard. Especially if you've got your jigs or your top waters. You see them and they hit it so hard. But back to what I was saying. So that day, I caught probably a good 4 or 5 bass. And that just that feeling, like I said, it stuck with me, and that was my preferred target now.
Right.
But the year after that, my dad, he had his waders, and he took them out, and he was going. He's like, "Well, you should, possibly get you a pair, or we could do something like that." And we talked about it, back and forth, this and that, and blah blah blah. Then we were walking through Walmart one day, and we were going by the kayak section. And he saw this big old 12-foot kayak, and it was on sale. And I think it was probably a good $250, which is just, pretty cheap, for when it comes to the bigger ones. It had a seat that comes out, it had the rod holders in it. And he's like, I'm going to get that. So he ended up buying it that day, and he ended up giving me the waders. Well, that next year we went back out to the lake. He went out on his kayak. He's catching all these fish, bringing them back, taking pictures and whatnot. I'm out there in the waders. I'm not catching nothing. I don't know what it was about that change or what happened there. That he was just able to, and he's able to go wherever.
Mhm.
He could go back into these coves where the seaweed was, just high and just perfect for the bass.
Mhm.
I couldn't walk in that. And I'm not going to try to walk in that because you get stuck in there and
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a kayak. That's pretty much the only way that we fish now.
Mhm.
We still fish from the shore. I still use the same setup that I do.
Right.
I cast it, halfway across the lake,
Mhm.
let it sit, and then throw a bell on there because
Sit and relax.
yep, especially but when you have the two poles,
Mhm.
because if you're working on this pole and you've got this one out in the water, it's good to have that bell on there because you can hear, oh, something's messing with that.
Yeah.
While you're messing with this pole because your attention is here, it's not necessarily on that pole.
Exactly.
Those bells, honestly, there's something. If you're fishing and you're bottom fishing, I mean, you can do it with a bobber too. But when you have a bobber, you want to watch
You
it.
have to watch.
You have to watch it, see what's going on.
Right.
But definitely invest in those bells because they are a game changer.
So I totally agree. You and I went out this summer a couple times, and when we went out to one of the places close to where we live, and we were catching. I was out bass fishing. You were out catfishing, and you were catching catfish every cast. And I'm out there on the little on your on your kayak, not catching a dang thing. And so then I came back to the shore. You showed me how to, how you did your setup, and then I was catching catfish too, and that was a lot of fun. The most recent time that we had gone out, uh, he had his setup like he's talking about. He, two poles, his bells, and sit back, relax, and I'm over there using my spinner. I think I changed baits every other cast because I was very impatient. But you caught a walleye. That was really cool to see, and it was keeping size, and we filleted it up, and it was good. I liked it. It was a good flavor. I've never had that before.
So, with fish, it's one of those things. So, fish is an acquired taste to begin with.
Mhm.
But at that, there's different types. So you're more of the fishy flavor. So you got more of the trout, salmon. The pink meats.
Yeah.
You have that type of meat. Then you have the white meats. So the white meats are the bass, the walleye,
Mhm.
bluegill, catfish. Those are the white meat fish.
Mhm.
There is a huge difference in the flavor and
Oh, for sure.
and how they are.
And how you cook it too. Because with the walleye, uh, I cooked it with just like Louisiana fish fry, and I mean, I thought it tasted pretty dang good. But when you make your trouts or salmon, just we don't have salmon here, or do we have salmon? No, we don't.
So
Yeah.
we do. No, so we do have salmon.
Here I am. I don't know what I'm talking about.
So now, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Like, they're nothing like up in Alaska. Nothing like anywhere by the oceans,
Mhm.
etc. But there is this one big lake that's it's quite a ways away from here.
You can say that.
But
Which one?
Huh?
You can say it. Which one?
which one? Blue Mesa.
Blue Mesa. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Blue Mesa, up in Blue Mesa.
Mhm.
So there's the salmon run
Okay.
that they have every
Yeah.
once in a while.
Okay, that sounds right.
So there was one year actually where we went out because we were going to participate. We're like, we'll go get some of these salmon.
Mhm.
And we showed up, and the amount of boats that were on that lake
Oh, I believe it.
was ridiculous. And something that's very, very, very frowned upon, but a lot of people were doing was snagging.
Mhm.
So, you're out there, you find, where they were. So you cast out and you would catch one. Well, this guy on a boat that was over here next to you would cast over your line intentionally, have his hook go down your line,
Mhm.
to snag onto your fish, catch your fish, and break it off from you.
Mhm.
And then he would end up catching it.
Really?
So that's one thing. A big part of the hunting, fishing, it doesn't matter what it is having that mutual respect, or at least an understanding of, this is how it is.
Other people, yeah. And that's one thing that I had touched upon in one of my other episodes, is that respect for sure. Like, you'd be surprised about the amount of people who don't have that line of respect for hunting or fishing. Like, they'll, when you're hunting, they'll post up right next to you. When you're fishing, there'll be 50 cars there, and they'll be the 51st person to be the, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, for sure, it's that line of respect. I wanted to ask you, like, what is your preferred, what's your preferred thing? Would you prefer hunting? Do you prefer fishing? If you prefer hunting, what animal do you prefer to hunt for? If you prefer fishing, like, what is your, like, main go-to? Like, if you were to pick between the two, what do you lean more towards?
So, as far as if I had to pick for more practical reasons, it would be fishing, because being able to fish, it doesn't take quite as much as learning to hunt. But with fishing, so I'm sure that a lot of people have heard about it, but there's this fish. I don't know if you know about it. I mean, I know you're not really big into fishing,
Right.
but they call it the fish of 10,000 casts. Okay. So I'm guessing by that reaction that you don't know what it is.
I do not know what that is.
The fish of 10,000 casts is a tiger muskie.
Okay.
So I have actually had honestly, I'll call it an honor, of being able that I've hooked into 3 tiger muskie. They all were at the same place. Unfortunately, none of them were keepers. Because with the tiger muskie, in order to keep them, they have to be 32 inches or longer.
Wow.
Yeah, so they are a predatory fish, almost like a pike.
Yep.
Pretty much. But they are elusive. They are. And then you want to talk about a fish that has fight in it. You hook into one of those, and if you're on a kayak, you're going for a ride. Because I've seen them. I've seen people pull them out at 5.5 feet.
Wow.
This just monster, massive fish, and the teeth on these fish are something out of nightmares. They're good 1.5 to 2 inches long.
Wow.
And just lined. Their whole mouth is just lined with these teeth.
That's crazy.
They're not like something that you just go out every day and you're like, well, I mean, you can try and catch them every day, but it's not going to happen. All 3 of the ones that I caught were all just flukes. I was not targeting them, and like, I didn't say I'm going to go out and I'm going to go try and catch a tiger muskie.
Right.
No, so 2 of them I was out on the kayak, and I was using my Panther Martins, and I was just, because honestly I was going for trout at that point, because Panther Martins are great for catching trout. And I'm just out there going, and then it hit, and I, set the hook. Well, when I went to set the hook, it didn't go nowhere. Like I couldn't pull back.
Really?
like I would if it was like a bass or anything like that. So I was confused at first. I was like, man, this must be the biggest bass I've ever hooked into.
Right.
And as I'm like fighting and reeling it in, it's just taking my drag. And I'm like, there's no way this is like a bass or anything like that. So I fought it for honestly probably a good 20, 25 minutes. And like I said, out on a kayak, you're not stable. You don't really have much ground to hold on.
Right.
So, it's just pulling the kayak, a little around here, there. And finally, when I got it close to the boat, I see this big old fish, and I'm like, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
I didn't have a net or anything.
Right.
Because I wasn't prepared for this.
Right.
So finally, I get it close enough. I thought it would be a great idea to just flick it into the kayak real quick. So I flick it into the kayak, and its head is facing towards me, like towards my feet. All of a sudden, it's just chomping. Chomping as it's slowly coming closer to my, towards my feet. So I'm like sliding it up into the kayak, and we're like, "Oh, get away, get away!"
Right.
And I'm paddling the shore, trying to get it. Like,
Right.
I probably get a good 10 to 15 feet from shore. I jump out of the kayak. I jump out and I drag the kayak up, and then I finally get it out. That tiger muskie was 30 inches long.
Wow.
So it was just barely to where I couldn't keep it, because that's one thing. I fish for sport, so I catch release. But I at least want to try every fish once. I do,
Yeah.
So that's one thing I have not been able to try is a tiger muskie.
That sucks.
Which, it's okay.
And being that close to being able to accomplish that goal. Wow. So kind of like wrap up like these questions real quick. What are your goals for the rest of this year?
Well, so for the rest of this year, we're already a good way into the hunting season.
I mean, like I've said before too, we've kind of unfortunately missed out on some things, such as like the deer. They do have a fall turkey season, which I'm thinking about. But I'm still I'm gonna have you go first, but like you said, we are quite a ways into the seasons already, and we've missed out on like deer and whatnot. But just continue. Sorry.
No, you're all good. So I just recently restarted my job in the last year. So this year I wasn't able to put in for what I wanted because I don't have all that much time to be able to take off to be able to do all these hunts and participate.
Right.
Because, like I said, usually I will do deer and I'll do elk. But this year, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. It's okay, and it is what it is. But the good thing about, you going, for ducks and geese and whatnot, there's not really a specific time period for that. There's the whole season, but you could pretty much go any time in that season, and you'll be good to go.
Exactly. It's not like for example, like the deer season, and it's pretty short. It's only I want to say it's a couple weeks. I might be wrong on that. I have to check my brochure to like verify, but like duck season, it's a couple months long. So for sure. I was thinking for me, like obviously I want a mallard so bad. That's my goal when it comes to my ducks. I am still contemplating whether or not I'm going to just do an over-the-counter elk third season. And that'll also be a part of the freeze. So for me, my goal is to figure it out whether or not I'm going to do it this year. So, because I would love to get back into my big game hunting. If I end up doing that, like I said, it's going to be part of snowy season, and it's going to be cold, and that is definitely a lot of layer related things, and because you're out in nature, right?
Yeah.
When you're elk hunting, you don't have a layout blind.
No.
To try and protect you.
Plus, to go elk hunting, you want to talk about a hike.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You'll be 3-4 miles from the trail, and then from the trail you have another 2-3 miles to your car.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a whole different game. But that's why I like elk. Honestly, I love hunting for elk.
Yeah, it's fun to be, out there, and like I had told them in my, one of my previous episodes about, preparing, and I brought up weather. And I was telling them about the story about my uncle who got lost and when it started snowing and we had to try and find him. Like I really enjoyed, I love snow. And I think this is more like a recent thing, since last year. Like I do love snow, and I don't have a problem being cold, right? So, that's why I would do a third season. elk. Um, if I did that, I definitely would invite you. For me, I don't think I'd take like a whole vacation for it. Mine would just hopefully be like a weekend thing, maybe like an extended weekend. Um, that'd be my plan for it. But for that, it's like there's a lot more that goes into like planning for that. Like if it's snowing, you ain't just staying in a tent. That's not happening and if you are like one my first year elk hunting, it was the third season too, and my grandpa he had this tent that had like the
stove in it.
Yeah, and it kept it really warm. It was nice for sure. Like I would definitely do that again. If I'm going to, I think I would look at the route of getting myself like a little pop up or a truck bed camper or something along the lines of that, where I can have like some actual heat and not have to be purchasing wood and stuff like that. But like that comes part of that, preparing. Like you got to be ready for the cold to keep yourself warm. Um, food.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's camp like that, you're gonna need, how are you gonna cook this food? Like, and uh, one last thing, part of that would be like getting your animal out,
packing it out.
Yeah, packing it out, especially in the cold. That ain't no easy task. In the snow, that is not no easy task.
Nope, and especially, the sucky part, unless you got multiple people with an elk, either you'll have to make multiple trips.
Yeah.
Or you'll have to end up leaving certain things behind because, you get a good elk, like a decent sized elk, you're packing out 400 or 500 pounds
for sure.
of meat, and trekking that all the way through whatever you walk through to get to where you're at it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have hit a lot of great points. I think this is a pretty good episode, for my first time having a guest on the show.
Yeah.
I think you did amazing. I think I would love to have you on again for sure. Before I end this one, I know I also told you guys that I was going to be recording my dove hunt on opening day. Well, that did not happen. I'll be completely honest. I did try getting some footage, but it didn't work out. Moral of it. I think I'm going to release some more episodes on the podcast just so that's the kind of content I'm getting first and building up a, community of people before I decide to actually start recording things. I know some people, if you've been listening to this show, that's something you might have been looking forward to. But as of right now, it's just going to be something that's going to have to wait for, a little bit until I can get myself a GoPro so I don't have to worry about trying to prop my phone up or setting a camera up and making sure it's in the right angle when I'm shooting at a dove or a duck. Like, for duck season, I promise you, I'll have a GoPro by then. But, yeah, I appreciate you joining us today. I think we brought up some valuable points that people, can really listen to and take something away from this. So, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This is really an experience, and if I can help somebody out, and if the things I say or the experiences that I've had, definitely. By no means am I a pro. I will admit that all day.
Mm-hmm.
But if something I can say can help somebody else out, or they just like to hear or laugh at the stories,
right?
That's all that matters.
A good time. Yeah, that's all that matters. So, well, thank you guys for joining in on another episode of Game Trail Pursuits, the podcast. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.